Okay, a good vach, everyone. I hope you had a wonderful yontif. Baruch Hashem, Shavuos is not yet over. Just like the holiday of Sukkot, the sacrifice is supposed to be brought on day one, but if it's not brought on day one, you have another week to bring the sacrifice. And so too on the holiday of Passover, so to the holiday of Shavuot, holiday of Shavuos. Torah says you have yemei tashlumin. You have days you're able to make up whatever you may have missed on Shavuos. The blessing, the center of where we want to be on Shavuos, is to receive the Torah in language of the Rebbe's blessing with besimcha. What's the other word was? You know the other word? Besimcha ube pnimius, with joy and inspiration. So we have another till the 12th of Sivan to make up whatever we may have missed in the holiday of Shavuos, to continue in joy and inspiration, and especially certain things that the Rebbe would highlight every year as being connected to where you're supposed to put your energies to receive the light of Shavuos to inspire the rest of the year. One thing is the study of Chumash Tilm and Tanya. The holiday of Shavuos is associated with the three tzaddikim, the Baal Shem who passed away on Shavuos, David HaMelech, who passed away on Shavuos as well, and Moshe Rabbeinu, who gave us a torah on Shavuos. And they are connected to the three parts of the regimen of the study of Chitas. Moshe Rabbeinu gave us the written Torah, the Chumash. David HaMelech gave us the Tehillim. And Baal Shem Tov's teachings are explained in a way of Chacham and Das, in a way of understanding and knowledge in the holy book of the Tanya. So there's a very special custom to study a part of Chumash Tilm and Tanya every day, and according to the regimen of study that was instituted by the previous Rebbe. And many people sought the Rebbe's advice for various things, and very often the Rebbe would tell them to focus on these three regimens of Torah study. Although, of course, you could study anything in Torah, but what's unique about these three areas of study is that they're shava l'chol nefesh. They're good for every soul. Every soul needs to study all kinds of things. And that's why after the morning blessings, we say various parts of the Torah. After thanking God for the mitzvah of Torah study, you're supposed to do something of Torah study, so you have to say the blessing of the Kohanim. But in addition to this Torah study we do in our prayers, the Chumash Tilm and Tanya is the bare minimum that every Jewish soul needs every day to get its energy, get the nourishment and spiritual nutrients it needs to be who we need to be. So on the day of Shavuos and these days of Tashlumin, we're supposed to focus on these shiurim and Chumash Tilm and Tanya, and this brings about tremendous blessing on a personal level, and not just blessing on a personal level, but the word chitas also means protection. Here in Los Angeles, unfortunately, I'm sure you're all watching the news, what's going on in Los Angeles and the riots and the protests, and we need protection. So studying Chumash Tilm and Tanya is a blessing for spiritual and physical protection for many, many different areas of life. As people would ask Rebbe often for different blessings, I mentioned, they would say, learn Chumash Tilm and Tanya. Okay, enough of my telling you what you need to do. I want to tell you the story I have for you tonight. Thank you, Reza Middle. Reza Middle, every week, she helps me prepare the story. Every Shabbos, she asks me to tell her a story. And that story is the story that I share with you on Motzei Shabbos. But today, Reza Middle, I have two stories. One of them I shared with you already, and one of them I didn't share with you. And the reason I chose these stories is because they're connected to the Baal Shem Tov, and also connected to a dear friend of mine whose yahrzeit is tonight, Rabbi Meir Abuchatzera. Meir Abuchatzera was the Rebbe's whistler. At the Rebbe's farbrengens, the Rebbe's gatherings, that would ask often that people should whistle. And I've explained, according to various realms of Torah study, both in the esoteric and exoteric parts of Torah, how the whistling expresses the freedom of the neshama, and how this is something that it's beneficial. And Reb Meir used to say very humbly, a very self-deprecating person in general, used to say there's a court jester and there's a court whistler. So I was the whistler. of course, there's significance and something special about Rameir, and one thing that I could tell you about Rameir, and that he said about himself actually, he said about himself that why was he chosen to become the Rebbe's whistler? He said because he never said anything bad about anybody, which is something incredible. He never said anything bad about anybody. So, first story I want to share with you is about the Baba Sali and the Baal Shem Tov. Incredible story. The Baba Sali's grandson granddaughter, married a Chabad chassid named Rabbi Machluf Amidav Crispin, who was once in an audience with the Rebbe, and the Rebbe asked him if he can share with the Rebbe something about the Baba Sali. The Baba Sali was Rameir Abu Chatzer's uncle, and he's told the Rebbe the following story. The Baba Sali moved to Israel in 1964, and he stayed at the home of his son-in-law, Rabbi Avraham Abu Chatzer. In this home, the Baba Sali would receive all Torah dignitaries who would come to him to receive blessing and advice. And in this city, where he was living in Yavne, the Baba Sali was once requested by his son-in-law to meet a certain Rosh Kollel, the person who started this Kollel in the city in Yavne, and he asked if he could see the Baba Sali. Baba Sali welcomed him and he honored him with saying L'chaim and giving him some. And the man started talking to Baba Sali, and the conversation went towards this difference between various Torah giants. And the man made the mistake of saying to the Baba Sali that, the Baal Shem Tov was very great in his way, but of course in Torah study you can't come close to my ancestors. This particular Rosh Kollel was a descendant of the Vilna Gaon. And he says, I come to Vilna Gaon, and of course I come from a far richer and broader understanding of Torah. And the Baba Sali became very upset. And he said, who are you to measure greatness of Torah? How can you decide which Torah giant is greater? How can you understand, who do you think you are to measure these Torah giants? And he said, I do not want someone who speaks about the Baal Shem Tov in that way, in a deprecating way, in my presence. And basically, you got to leave. But the Baba Sali wasn't satisfied with that. After he left, Baba Sali wanted to speak to his son-in-law. How could you possibly bring someone into my presence who speaks against the Baal Shem Tov? He wasn't satisfied with that either. Then Baba Sali said, if this kollel that this man is running still exists tomorrow, that's what Baba Sali said, if it still exists tomorrow morning, I am not the Baba Sali. And the rabbi of the city said, we need this kollel, what will happen to us? So his son-in-law said, the Baba Sali knows what he's doing, this is what the Baba Sali said. And sure enough, next morning, the mayor got a call from the interior minister of Israel, and he called the head of the kollel, and he said to him, the funding for this kollel has been cut completely, and the kollel is now closed. That day, the kollel was closed. But the Baba Sali wasn't satisfied with that either. The Baba Sali moved right after that to Ashkelon. He didn't want to be in the presence in an area where people speak about the Baal Shem Tov. The Baba Sali said, I know who the Baal Shem Tov is, and how could someone speak against the Baal Shem Tov? So this whole story was told to the Rebbe by his Baba Sali's grandson-in-law, if you will, and the Rebbe said, such an incredible story, how come you don't share these stories? So here I am, sharing an incredible story. That's story number one. Story number two, about the Baal Shem Tov himself, story of the Baal Shem Tov. It's customary, especially, to try to find the story of the Baal Shem Tov on Matzah Shabbos. And here you go. There is a book written by the previous Rebbe, which is really a private book, but it's been published. The previous Rebbe wrote an entire book in one letter to his daughter, Rebbetzin Chaim Mushka, the Rebbe's wife. I have no idea what the purpose of this letter is. I don't know what motivated this letter, but this letter is a story, one story of the Baal Shem Tov. It's an entire book, and it's about a man, tzaddik, not just a regular person, of course, a tzaddik, Rabbi Mordechai, a student of the Baal Shem Tov. Rabbi Mordechai, I'm not going to tell you the whole story tonight, it's an entire book, but I will tell you what the story is based on, how the story begins. Rabbi Mordechai was a very great Torah scholar and Kabbalist, even before meeting the Baal Shem Tov. And after he visited the Baal Shem Tov, he was there for some time. He was very, very excited about this new path in service of Hashem that he had discovered. And he always would think about two of his closest friends that he used to study with when he was younger, Rabbi Doiv and Reb Chaim. And he thought that these people are never merited to meet the Baal Shem Tov. And he is lucky that he has met the Baal Shem Tov. Wouldn't it be great if he could introduce them to the Baal Shem Tov? That's what he had in his mind, but he never did anything with this thought. One day, the Baal Shem Tov shared the following teaching. It says in the Torah that when you see the donkey of your enemy, you see how the donkey is crouching under his burden, and you may resist from helping this person. So the Torah says you have to help. Don't resist from helping. You gotta help. That's what the Torah says. So the Baal Shem Tov explained this pasuk to mean the following: Kisir chamer, when you see your donkey, the word for donkey is related to the word materialism. Chamor, which means donkey, is related to the word chomer, which means the material. If you look deeply, say the Baal Shem Tov, into the material side of your life, into the animalistic side of your life, you will see seinacha. You'll see it hates you. You'll see that the animalistic part of ourselves hates the godly soul and doesn't like the fact that godly soul is so into Torah study and davening and learning and giving tzedakah, and it crouches under its burden. It resists the burden of Torah. It wants to cast off the yoke of Torah. So what would you think to do? You would think to do to hurt the body, to start fasting and suffering in order to prevent the body from challenging the neshama. So you would think you should hurt the body. Said the Baal Shem Tov, this isn't loy bezua derech yishkanei Hashem. That is not the path where the light of God will rest. The light of Hashem will not rest in that way. Instead, as the Baal Shem Tov said, the person should never fast and never, of course, you have to fast the 4 fasts that we're required to according to the code of Jewish law, but we shouldn't take additional fasts. We should not hurt the body. Instead, what the pasuk says, the verse says, help the donkey of your enemy. And so too, a person has to make sure that their body is healthy and how precious the Jewish body is, and we should never hurt the body. On the contrary, we have to pay attention to the body. By the way, this is very connected to the holiday of Shavuot, where God gave the Torah to us here in this physical world, and the angels said, don't give the Torah to human beings, they're regular people. Why would you give the Torah to people here on earth when you have angels in heaven? And Moses told the angels, do you have a father and mother? And Torah says, honor your father and mother. Do you live among people who serve idols? They have to be cautioned not to serve idols. It says in the Torah, I am Lord your God, took you out of Egypt. Were you ever in Egypt? And again, Moses proves to the angels that the Torah is about the physical world and about elevating the physical. And that's what the Baal Shem Tov said in this teaching, that you cannot hurt your body. In the contrary, you have to elevate the physical body. Then the Baal Shem Tov continued. People are familiar with both these teachings as separate teachings, but the Baal Shem Tov actually said them in succession. The Baal Shem Tov then continued and said, you have to have sacrifice to do a Jew a favor, a physical favor, and especially a spiritual favor. Then he continued, a soul comes to the world for 70 or 80 years just to do a person a favor. That's what Baal Shem Tov said. Rabbi Mordechai heard this teaching and he reviewed it many, many times, thinking about it deeply and thinking about his friends, Rabbi Doiv and Rabbi Chaim, who had never merited to meet the Baal Shem Tov. And he was thinking, maybe he should just travel and try to find these friends and try to share with them the teachings of Baal Shem Tov. He was on the fence. He wasn't sure if he should do this or shouldn't do this. But he was thinking about if he would go out and try to find his friends. I mean, who says he would find them, first of all? And even if he would find them, who says they would even listen to him? He remembers himself, and Mordechai is saying the story, previous Rebbe describing Mordechai's thoughts. The Friedrich said that Mordechai himself, why did he come to Baal Shem Tov? He only came to Baal Shem Tov because he had heard that there was this guy who used to be a school teacher's helper, and then he became a person who would work with clay and sand, and he would dig clay and sand, and then he heard that this guy all of a sudden threw off his guise of being a commoner, and he revealed himself as this incredible Torah scholar and wonder worker. And he had been so curious to make the journey to meet the Baal Shem Tov. And on the way there, he remembers thinking to himself, how am I doing this? I'm so brilliant. I'm so knowledgeable. Why in the world am I traveling to Baal Shem Tov? Don't I know better? Where is my intelligence? Why am I listening to these folk tales and traveling to Baal Shem Tov? He's thinking about this, thinking how he's going to, hey, where are you going, Rosie? You have to go? Okay. He's thinking, how am I going to go to my friends and tell them about the Baal Shem Tov? They're not going to listen to me. They'll laugh at me. And who says I'll find them? And he's thinking like this is, and meanwhile he's by the Baal Shem Tov, and it's so wonderful to be by the Baal Shem Tov. But then he thought, Baal Shem Tov says you have to have sacrifice to do a Jew a favor. So what greater sacrifice can there be than leaving his Rebbe? So of course you should leave, and you should have sacrifice to do a favor to his two friends, the Bishachar David and Bechayim. He's about to resolve to leave, but he decided before he left, he was going to stay just a few more days. And he stayed a few more days with the Baal Shem Tov. And he was thinking, perhaps he should ask the Baal Shem Tov if he should go. But then he thought to himself, why should he ask the Baal Shem Tov if he should go? If the Baal Shem Tov said you have to have sacrifice to do a person a favor, what's the question? But then he thought to himself, I have an idea. Baal Shem Tov is gifted with divine inspiration. I'll ask the Baal Shem Tov to use his gift to tell me where my friends are and what I should say to them. But then he's thinking, what an insolent thing to do, to ask the Baal Shem Tov to use his divine inspiration just to save me a few years of travel, trying to find my friends. This is insolent to ask the Baal Shem Tov to use his Ruach HaKodesh, to use his divine inspiration, just to make my life easier. So he stayed with the Baal Shem Tov a few more days, and then he decided to leave, and he set out on the journey. And as he is about to leave, he's thinking he should seek the Baal Shem Tov's blessing before leaving, because that's halacha. Before you leave your teacher, the Jewish law says you're supposed to ask for a blessing before departing. But then he thought to himself, if the Baal Shem Tov knows where he's going, then good. If for whatever reason the Baal Shem Tov was not told by God where he's going, would he be inclined to share with Baal Shem Tov where he's going? And he had this question. He decided he's not going to tell Baal Shem Tov. He's going to go. And he starts on his journey. And he makes it to the outskirts of the city. And then the emissary of the Baal Shem Tov arrives. And the emissary of the Baal Shem Tov says to him that the Baal Shem Tov is calling him, he should go back to Baal Shem Tov. He goes back to Baal Shem Tov. And the Baal Shem Tov says to him, thank God you were victorious with the war within yourself. You won the war within yourself. Then he said, the Baal Shem Tov said to him, when you meet Yabbi Sachar Doiv, you should tell Yabbi Sachar Doiv that if he comes to the Baal Shem Tov, the Baal Shem Tov will give him a regimen of Torah study that will broaden his intellectual capacities. You should tell Reb Chaim, said the Baal Shem Tov, that if he comes to the Baal Shem Tov, the Baal Shem Tov will give him a regimen of Torah study in the Medrash and in the Zohar, which will broaden his emotional, will open up his heart. And you, the Baal Shem Tov, said to the Mordechai, to you I bless you to be perfect in your service of a God, in your heart and in your mind. Do not rush along the way, because there's much to be accomplished until you reach your final destination. And God should give you success, that all the blessings and all the promises should be fulfilled. This is how the story begins. And then Mordechai travels and he tries to meet his friends, and he is challenged, and it's an incredible 100-page story in Yiddish, and it's been translated in English in this book called The Making of Chassidim. You can all read the story here. It's an incredible story about this mission of Rabbi Mordechai to help his friends learn about the Baal Shem Tov. I was thinking about the story connecting to Rabbi Meir Abisera, because Rabbi Meir was very, very real person, very authentic person who thought and expressed his feelings very vividly and very artistically. Rabbi Meir was enamored by the Torah's praise for a gazelle. If I remember correctly, Rabbi Meir would talk about how a gazelle would run away, but then the gazelle would always turn back and look back to where it ran from. And so Rabbi Meir would always talk about how it says in different places in the Torah, how Mashiach is compared to gazelle, Shabbat is compared to gazelle, But most of all, he thought that this is the role of a Jew. How a Jew, a chassid, has to constantly be thinking about Moshe Rabbeinu, thinking about God, and always looking back, and always questioning, are you on the right path? And this story of Mordechai, he was on the road. Should he go? Shouldn't he go? Should he ask the Baal Shem Tov? And this is the Meir will talk about the beauty of a chassid. The beauty of a chassid is that he has this devotion and simplicity and trust in the tzaddik and trust in Hashem, and especially connected to the time that we're in right now. We're coming from giving the Torah, where God asked us if we wanted the Torah, and we said we will do before we understand. We had this very pure-hearted response to God's request. With emunah and bitachon, we can accomplish anything. So we should take this special koyach, the special power of the holiday of Shavuos, and add to our Torah study, add to our study of the Torah in general, and add also to the teachings of Chumash, Tehillim, and Tanya. And through this, by Yechitas Al-Kim Al-Arim, there'll be protection of Hashem on all of us. And the main thing is, the exile is over, time for Mashiach to come, and we have to be like the gazelle with our eyes on Hashem, waiting for the bracha to come down, and until it does, to think about the next good thought, next good word, next good action we could do to tip the scale and bring Mashiach. May Meir's neshama have an aliyah, may he be good to better. On behalf of his wife and his children and all of Am Yisrael, we should see Mashiach now. A good vach and good tamid.